In the early hours of a seemingly ordinary day in Lakeside Meadows, a neighborhood known for its quiet streets and impeccably maintained homes, a single phone call set off a chain of events that would soon upend long-held assumptions. Karen Mitchell, a middle-aged resident with an unyielding belief in the proper way of life, peered through her living room window with a mix of irritation and self-righteousness. Her gaze was fixed on the across-the-street residence, where Devin Carter, a composed black homeowner, was carrying out what appeared to be a routine task. Devin, dressed in casual, comfortable clothes and methodically operating the controls on his new automated pool gate, was merely securing his property after a refreshing swim. To Karen, however, this unassuming act was an intolerable breach of what she believed was the established order. Convinced that Devin's behavior was a deliberate provocation meant to disrupt the standards of Lakeside Meadows, she promptly grabbed her cell phone and dialed 911. With a tone laden with indignation, she declared to the dispatcher, "There's a black man in that pool, and he's causing a disturbance. He needs to be stopped immediately." Almost instantly, her words sent ripples of tension across the normally placid neighborhood. Neighbors peered out, exchanging hushed comments and raised eyebrows, as Karen's call was relayed through the local emergency system. What she thought would be a swift intervention to correct the situation was about to reveal a far more complex and unsettling truth. Within minutes, a police cruiser arrived, and Officer Aaron Lewis approached Devin's property. Rather than find a disruptive scene, however, Officer Lewis discovered a man diligently ensuring that every safety measure was in place. Devin explained calmly, "I was just closing my pool gate to secure my home. I take pride in keeping my property safe for my family." As Officer Lewis reviewed Devin's explanation and confirmed his rightful ownership via digital record from a nearby security camera, the evidence painted a picture of an entirely routine, responsible act. Meanwhile, Karen's smug satisfaction began to falter as murmurs started circulating among onlookers. What had seemed like an outrageous disturbance was, in reality, a simple act of home maintenance, and her 911 call had been entirely unfounded. In that charged moment, the truth began to ripple outward. The digital footage captured every detail, and as it spread through social media and local news channels, the community's perspective shifted. Karen's call, meant to enforce her narrow view of propriety, was about to expose her own deep-seated bias, setting the stage for a dramatic reversal that would challenge the very foundations of Lakeside Meadows. Lakeside Meadows was a suburban haven where each meticulously landscaped yard and sparkling pool testified to the residents' dedication to maintaining an image of perfection. Wide streets flanked by mature trees and pristine sidewalks created an atmosphere of calm order, where neighbors took pride in upholding an unspoken set of standards. In this meticulously curated environment, every resident was expected to contribute to the overall image of the community, a standard that, for some, meant preserving an outdated hierarchy of proper behavior. Karen Mitchell, a woman in her early 50s with impeccably styled hair and designer clothing, had earned a reputation as one of Lakeside Meadows' self-appointed guardians of order. Known for her frequent calls to authorities over minor infractions, Karen believed that she was defending the community's values. To her, every deviation, no matter how trivial, was an affront that needed immediate correction. Over the years, her vigilance had become both admired and quietly resented by her neighbors. Across the street lived Devin Carter, a soft-spoken black man in his late 40s whose presence embodied the quiet dignity of hard work and responsibility. After years of building his life from modest beginnings, Devin had invested in renovating his home and installing a state-of-the-art automated pool gate, a symbol of his commitment to security and his pride as a homeowner. His days were marked by calm routines, a morning swim, followed by careful attention to his property, ensuring that everything was in perfect order. Devin's demeanor, marked by steady determination and gentle courtesy, earned him respect among many who recognized his dedication, even if some refused to see it through a biased lens. The physical setting of Lakeside Meadows provided a stark backdrop for the unfolding drama. Rows of identical, well-maintained homes, complete with private pools and neatly trimmed hedges, projected an image of uniform excellence. Yet beneath this veneer of perfection, subtle tensions simmered, tensions rooted in tradition and a resistance to change. While many residents welcomed the diversity that modern life brought, others clung to the belief that only those who fit a narrow mold should be allowed to thrive. On the day in question, as Karen observed from her meticulously cared-for yard, she fixated on Devon's pool. For Karen, the sight of a black man enjoying his property was not simply an innocent act of leisure. It was a challenge to the social order she cherished. Convinced that Devon's actions were a deliberate attempt to disrupt the established norms of Lakeside Meadows, she was determined to act. As the story unfolded with the arrival of Officer Aaron Lewis and the quiet, unruffled explanation provided by Devon, the stage was set for more than just a dispute over a pool gate. It became a symbol of the clash between narrow-minded prejudice and the unyielding truth of responsibility. The digital evidence soon began to circulate, revealing that Devon's routine actions were executed with the same care and diligence that any homeowner would expect to see. The community, once divided by superficial judgments, began to rally around the truth, calling into question long-held biases and demanding accountability for those who misused public resources for personal vendettas. In Lakeside Meadows, where every detail mattered, the incident promised not only to expose the flaws in Karen's perspective, but also to spark a broader discussion about fairness, integrity, and the evolving values of a modern community. The calm of Lakeside Meadows was abruptly shattered by the 911 call made by Karen Mitchell. As Officer Aaron Lewis arrived on the scene, his first task was to assess the situation at Devon Carter's property. The responding officer's routine inquiry quickly revealed a startling contrast between Karen's alarm and the peaceful reality of Devon's actions. "Sir, can you tell me what you were doing?" Officer Lewis asked in a measured tone as he approached the pool area. Devon, with a polite nod, explained, "I was just closing my pool gate. I like to ensure my home is secure for my family." His voice was steady, devoid of any hint of misconduct. While Devon's explanation was simple and straightforward, Karen's account had already begun to ripple through the neighborhood. Neighbors, who had long witnessed Karen's zealous enforcement of her own moral code, started to murmur among themselves. Some, with eyes filled with disbelief, questioned the rationale behind calling 911 over what appeared to be an entirely innocuous act. "It's just a pool gate being closed," one resident whispered to another, shaking his head in dismay. As Officer Lewis reviewed digital records from a nearby security camera, a device installed by a vigilant neighbor, he confirmed that the footage showed Devon's actions to be nothing more than routine home maintenance. The video clearly depicted a man focused on his responsibilities, methodically ensuring that his automated gate closed smoothly without incident. This undeniable evidence stood in stark opposition to Karen's fervent claims. Soon, the digital clip found its way onto social media, sparking a wildfire of reactions. Hashtags like hashtag Justice for Devon and hashtag Real Homeowner began trending locally, and supportive comments flooded in from residents and outsiders alike. Videos of the incident circulated rapidly, each one underscoring the absurdity of Karen's complaint. The once silent murmur of neighbors now erupted into heated debates at local coffee shops and on neighborhood forums. "Why would someone call the police over something so trivial?" asked one frustrated resident online. "Our community should be about responsibility, not prejudice," another commented. In the midst of this growing controversy, Officer Lewis meticulously compiled his report, documenting every detail, from the exact time Devon closed his pool gate to the precise words Karen had used during her call. His report painted an irrefutable picture. Devon had acted within his rights as a homeowner, while Karen's 911 call was driven solely by her own biased perceptions. The evidence was clear, and as it continued to circulate, even some of Karen's staunch supporters began to question her judgment. Karen, still standing in her meticulously kept yard with her phone pressed to her ear, found herself increasingly isolated. The smug expression she had worn at the moment of the call began to falter as more neighbors expressed their disbelief and disapproval. "This is just an attempt to impose her own narrow view on everyone else," someone remarked, their tone tinged with disappointment. What had started as a personal crusade to enforce community norms had now become a symbol of how public resources could be misused for personal vendettas. As the day wore on, the internal investigation gathered momentum, and news outlets began to report on the incident. Digital evidence and eyewitness accounts converged to form a compelling narrative that challenged the very basis of Karen's complaint. The notion that a routine act of securing a pool could be framed as a disturbance was met with incredulity by legal experts, who noted that such calls had been made in the past, but always with a pattern of bias. The mounting evidence forced a broader conversation about the use of emergency services in Lakeside Meadows. At a community meeting held that evening, residents passionately debated the appropriate use of 911, with many arguing that such calls should be reserved for genuine emergencies. The discussion quickly turned to the issue of prejudice, how personal bias could distort reality and lead to unwarranted interventions by public authorities. By the close of the day, the incident had evolved from a single 911 call into a full-scale examination of community values. Digital recordings, social media reactions, and eyewitness testimonies all underscored one inescapable truth. Devin Carter had acted responsibly, while Karen Mitchell's call had been nothing more than an expression of deep-rooted prejudice. The stage was now set for a dramatic escalation that would force Lakeside Meadows to confront its own biases and pave the way for meaningful reform. In the days that followed the incident, Lakeside Meadows transformed from a picture of suburban tranquility into a hotbed of controversy and fervent public debate. The video footage of Devin's routine actions spread like wildfire on social media, and hashtags such as hashtag Justice for Devin and hashtag No to Prejudice became rallying cries for a growing number of residents. Local news channels began broadcasting segments on the incident, interviewing shocked neighbors and community leaders who condemned the misuse of emergency services to enforce personal biases. Within the community, heated discussions erupted at town hall meetings and informal gatherings. Longtime residents, who had once quietly admired Karen Mitchell's vigilance, now found themselves divided. "I can't believe someone would call 911 over a pool gate," one neighbor argued passionately at a meeting. "This isn't about safety, it's about prejudice." Supporters of Devin praised his calm professionalism and the evidence that vindicated his actions, while others wrestled with the uncomfortable truth that public resources were being weaponized by personal vendettas. The local police department took notice. Officer Aaron Lewis's detailed report, supported by digital footage and eyewitness statements, forced senior officials to re-examine their procedures for handling 911 calls. In a series of emergency meetings, police leaders acknowledged that Karen's repeated calls, now part of a documented pattern, needed to be addressed to prevent further misuse of the system. "We must ensure that our emergency services are reserved for real emergencies," one senior officer stated, his tone resolute as he reviewed the evidence. At the same time, community leaders and civil rights organizations began organizing protests and public forums. Banners with messages like "Every call matters" and "Stop bias in 911" were hoisted in front of the local police station and community centers. These gatherings brought together a diverse array of voices, from families who had experienced discrimination to young activists demanding systemic change. "Our community deserves better," one demonstrator proclaimed, "and we won't rest until every instance of bias is exposed and corrected." Digital platforms became a focal point for debate as well. Posts and comments flooded in, with many users expressing outrage at the incident and demanding that Karen Mitchell be held accountable. Videos of the incident were remixed with commentary, and influential local figures began weighing in on the issue. One popular blogger wrote, "This is a clear example of how our perceptions can be twisted by prejudice. It's time for Lakeside Meadows to stand up for what is right." As pressure mounted, the police department announced that it would release the full internal report regarding the misuse of emergency services. This decision, aimed at increasing transparency and restoring public trust, was met with mixed reactions. Some praised the move as a step toward accountability, while others remained skeptical about whether true change would occur. Nevertheless, the public outcry had reached a fever pitch, and every new piece of evidence reinforced the community's demand for reform. Karen Mitchell, once so confident in her ability to police her neighborhood, began to find herself isolated. Neighbors who had previously looked on with mild approval now turned away, whispering about her repeated incidents and the harm they had caused. Private conversations revealed that many had grown tired of her relentless 911 calls, and a digital archive of her past complaints emerged, painting a damning picture of a resident driven more by prejudice than by genuine concern for public safety. In the midst of this escalating tension, legal experts and social commentators began to debate the broader implications of the incident. Panels on local television discussed how the misuse of 911 could undermine trust in emergency services and exacerbate social divisions. When public resources are misused to enforce personal biases, it is a betrayal of the community's trust, one expert noted. We must ensure that every call for help is treated with the seriousness it deserves, without prejudice. As the investigation and public debate continued, the stage was set for a dramatic turning point. The combined force of digital evidence, impassioned community protest, and a growing internal consensus within the police department created an environment where change was not only possible but inevitable. The narrative had shifted from a simple case of a misplaced 911 call to a broader movement demanding accountability and fairness. A movement that promised to redefine the use of public resources in Lakeside Meadows. By the end of the week, every shared video clip, every comment on social media, and every town hall discussion had contributed to a chorus of voices demanding that the old, biased ways be left behind. The community was on the brink of a decisive moment, a turning point that would force every institution in Lakeside Meadows to confront its own prejudices and rebuild trust on the foundation of truth and fairness. The decisive moment arrived on a cool morning in a packed boardroom at the Lakeside Meadows Community Center. Senior city officials, police department representatives, community leaders, and local media gathered to hear the final resolution of the investigation into Karen Mitchell's 911 call. With an air of measured authority and empathetic resolve, Councilwoman Rebecca Moore stepped up to the podium. After a comprehensive review of all digital records, surveillance footage, and eyewitness testimonies, we have reached an incontrovertible conclusion. Councilwoman Moore began, her voice clear and unwavering. It is evident that the 911 call made by Mrs. Karen Mitchell was not grounded in any genuine concern for public safety, but was rather a manifestation of deep-seated prejudice. Her call was an abuse of our emergency services, a misuse that undermines the trust we place in our community's institutions. A heavy silence enveloped the room as Moore continued. Effective immediately, Mrs. Mitchell's history of biased 911 calls will be subjected to a full disciplinary review. Furthermore, we are implementing new protocols to ensure that such misuse is prevented in the future. Our community must be protected from the weaponization of public resources for personal vendettas. Her declaration resonated powerfully with every attendee, marking a clear commitment to accountability and reform. At that moment, a representative for the affected community, a dignified resident who had long advocated for justice, rose to speak. Today, we stand together to say that no one is above accountability, he declared, his voice strong and measured. We demand that every act of prejudice be met with swift and decisive action, so that our community may move forward in unity and respect. His words were met with resounding applause, a testament to the collective desire for change. Following this, a senior police official took the stage and presented the final dossier, a meticulously compiled record of digital footage, internal logs, and multiple eyewitness accounts that left no doubt about the nature of the incident. Every piece of evidence confirmed that Devin Carter had acted responsibly, and that Mrs. Mitchell's call was nothing more than a product of her narrow, discriminatory perspective. The Internal Affairs panel unanimously endorsed the decision to impose strict disciplinary measures against her. In that pivotal moment, Councilwoman Moore concluded, "Let this be a turning point for Lakeside Meadows, a day when our commitment to justice prevails over prejudice. We owe it to every resident to ensure that our emergency services are used for their intended purpose, to protect and serve without bias or favoritism." Her final words, delivered with steadfast conviction, marked a dramatic reversal in the community's trust, a signal that the era of unchecked prejudice was coming to an end. The faces in the room reflected a mix of shock, determination, and hope. Even those who had once supported Mrs. Mitchell's actions now recognized that the truth had forced a long-overdue reckoning. The balance of power had shifted decisively, and as the meeting adjourned, it was clear that Lakeside Meadows was poised to embrace a future defined by fairness, accountability, and unity. In the weeks that followed the landmark resolution, Lakeside Meadows experienced a gradual yet profound transformation. News of the disciplinary review against Karen Mitchell spread rapidly through local media and online, igniting a citywide dialogue about the misuse of emergency services and the deep-seated prejudices that had long been tolerated in the community. Community meetings and town hall gatherings became the forum for residents to share their experiences and to demand lasting reforms. Our community is stronger when every voice is heard, and every call for help is genuine, one local activist declared at a bustling town hall. The public's unified outcry led to the implementation of new training programs for emergency responders, emphasizing cultural sensitivity and unbiased service. Local officials, determined to restore trust in public institutions, introduced stricter guidelines on the use of 911, ensuring that calls were thoroughly vetted before any action was taken. The internal investigation within the Oak Ridge Police Department also sparked sweeping changes. Senior officers instituted regular internal audits and established transparent disciplinary protocols to prevent the misuse of public resources for personal vendettas. "We must build a system where every individual is treated with the dignity they deserve," stated Director Samuel Green at a follow-up press conference, his words underscoring the renewed commitment to fairness and accountability. For Devin Carter, whose simple act of securing his pool had become the catalyst for this entire movement, the ordeal was a quiet triumph. Neighbors, once divided by subtle biases, now rallied around his example of responsibility and integrity. Digital evidence and social media posts transformed his image from that of a routine homeowner to a symbol of resilience, a reminder that ordinary actions, when viewed through the lens of truth, could expose the most egregious forms of prejudice. Even Karen Mitchell, facing the public consequences of her repeated misuse of emergency services, was forced into a period of introspection. Isolated by mounting evidence and community backlash, she found herself confronting the reality that her actions had not only undermined the trust of her neighbors, but had also tarnished the reputation of a community that prided itself on fairness. While some longtime supporters remained silent, many others openly called for reform, a reform that would ensure that such abuses could never again go unchallenged. At a final celebratory event held in the Central Park of Lakeside Meadows, community leaders, local officials, and residents gathered under the soft glow of twilight to mark the dawn of a new era. A large banner reading "Justice and Unity for All" hung between mature oak trees, and heartfelt speeches filled the air with messages of hope and renewal. Today, we honor not only the truth that has set us free, but also the promise of a future where every call is treated with the respect it deserves, proclaimed Councilwoman Rebecca Moore, her voice echoing with determination. As the event drew to a close and the crowd dispersed into the night, a sense of unity and renewed purpose settled over Lakeside Meadows. The painful memory of that fateful 911 call had been transformed into a catalyst for systemic change, a turning point that redefined the community's values and ensured that public resources would be used to protect and serve all residents without bias. In the end, the story of that day, when a baseless prejudice call was exposed by undeniable evidence and a united community, became a beacon of hope for Lakeside Meadows. It served as a powerful reminder that truth, when championed by accountability and the collective will of the people, can dispel even the darkest shadows of hate. With every new day, the promise of justice grew stronger, ensuring that the legacy of prejudice would be replaced by a future defined by fairness, inclusion, and unwavering integrity.